The old barn stood silhouetted against a bruised twilight sky, its spine broken, its timbers groaning a final surrender. To any sane man, it was a ghost, a monument to decay. But for Jack, a man hollowed out by a grief so vast it had its own gravity, it was just a place to wait for the end. Beside him, Aries, his German shepherd, whined low in his throat, a sound of profound insistence. For 3 days, the dog had refused to leave this spot, pawing at a single, warped floorboard, possessed by a certainty that defied reason. To anyone else, it was just a dog's strange fixation on a worthless ruin. But Aries knew. He knew that buried beneath the rot and dust lay a 50-year-old secret. A secret of betrayal and genius worth a fortune. A secret that had already cost Jack's wife her life and was about to put him in the crosshairs of the man who killed her. If stories of unwavering loyalty and hard-earned redemption speak to your heart, we would be honored if you would support us by subscribing to the channel. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from today. It means the world to us. The silence that followed Sarah's death wasn't empty. It was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of a house where laughter used to echo, now filled only with the soft pad of a dog's paws and the rhythmic glug of whiskey pouring into a glass. Jack had retreated into that silence, wrapping it around himself like a shroud. He'd bought this derelict farmstead for a pittance, seeking an isolation as complete as his despair. He had planned to let the weeds consume the house, the barn, and himself along with them. But Aries would not allow it. The dog, Sarah's last gift to him, had become his anchor and his warden. When the bottle came out, a wet nose would nudge it away. When Jack stared too long at the tree-line where the property met the indifferent woods, a heavy paw would land on his knee, grounding him. Now this stubborn, inexplicable vigil in the decaying barn. For 3 days, Aries had barely eaten, drinking only from a puddle of rainwater on the dirt floor, his entire being focused on that one spot. Jack, weary beyond words, finally knelt. "All right, boy," he murmured, his voice rough from disuse. "All right, you win. What is it? What's got you so worked up?" He ran his hand over the warped plank. It was no different from the others, yet Aries's whining intensified, his claws scratching anxiously at the wood. With a sigh that dredged up the dregs of his energy, Jack went to his truck and returned with a crowbar. The wood groaned in protest, splintering as he pried it loose. The smell of damp earth and something else, oiled canvas and old metal, rose from the cavity below. There, nestled in a carefully dug hollow, was a small steel box, wrapped in decaying fabric. Jack carried the box back to the dusty farmhouse, Aries trotting at his heels, a quiet satisfaction in his gait. The box was heavy, its lock a complex, old-world mechanism that would have deterred a casual thief. But Jack's hands, though now calloused from neglect, remembered their training. In another life, a life before Sarah, those hands had disarmed explosives and breached fortified doors. He retrieved a small kit of tools from a footlocker he hadn't opened in years, the metallic click of the latches echoing like gunshots in the quiet house. With a surgeon's precision, he manipulated the tumblers, feeling the faint shifts in the mechanism. It took 20 minutes, a focused eternity where the grief receded, replaced by the familiar concentration of a mission. A final, satisfying clank, and the lid swung open. Inside, resting on faded velvet, was not gold or jewels, but a leather-bound journal and a single, intricately machined brass key. He opened the journal. The ink was faded, but the script was elegant, precise. It was the diary of a man named Elias Vance, dated 50 years prior. Elias was an engineer, an inventor, who had poured his life into a revolutionary energy storage device on this very property. The pages were filled with complex equations and hopeful prose, a man on the cusp of changing the world. But the tone shifted in the final entries. Elias wrote of his partner, a man with a sharp mind for business but a hollow soul, who had grown greedy. He wrote of betrayal, of his work being stolen, of threats against his family. The last entry was chilling. "He will not get the core. I have hidden it where only a puzzle can lead. The lock is my heart, And the key is my legacy. Jack looked at the brass key in his hand. This was no longer just a derelict barn. It was a tombstone, a final testament. For the first time in a year, he felt a flicker of something other than loss. It was a sense of duty, a responsibility to the ghost who had entrusted his legacy to the earth beneath his feet. The next morning, Jack didn't reach for the bottle. He reached for a hammer. The restoration of the barn began not as an act of hope, but as an act of respect for Elias Vance. He started with the roof, clearing away the debris and rotten shingles under the hot sun. The physical labor was a balm, each swing of the hammer a small rebellion against the inertia of his grief. His muscles, long dormant, ached with a satisfying burn. Aries lay in the shade, watching him with intelligent eyes, a silent supervisor. As he worked, Elias's journal was never far from his mind. The puzzle was the key. Jack, a cryptographer in his former life, recognized patterns in the text. Certain words were capitalized oddly. Page numbers seemed to correspond to coordinates within the barn itself. Following the clues, he measured from the north wall, counted beams overhead, and found himself standing before the old stone fireplace at the barn's far end. One stone just above the mantel was loose. He worked it free with the crowbar. Behind it was a small, keyhole-shaped recess, perfectly matching the brass key from the box. He inserted the key and turned. Not a click, but a low, grinding rumble from below. A section of the hearthstone slowly receded into the floor, revealing a dark, narrow staircase spiraling down into the earth. A hidden workshop. The air that rose up was cool and smelled of ozone and dormant machinery. Jack grabbed a flashlight. As he descended, Aries right behind him, he felt he was not just uncovering Elias's secrets, but unearthing a part of himself he thought was long buried. The soldier, the problem solver, the man with a purpose. He was no longer just surviving, he was on a mission. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. The barn transformed under Jack's relentless effort. A new roof sat sturdy and proud. He replaced rotten timbers, his hands learning the language of wood, the satisfaction of a perfect joint, the scent of fresh-cut oak. The structure, once a symbol of his own brokenness, was becoming a fortress of solitude, a testament to resilience. Its restoration mirrored a subtle shift within him. The crushing weight on his chest had lessened, not gone, but manageable. He started eating regular meals, his gaunt frame filling out. He even drove into the small, nearby town for supplies, exchanging quiet nods with the staff at the hardware store. It was a minimal connection, but it was a connection nonetheless. One afternoon, as he was fitting a new window pane into the main bay door, a luxury sedan crunched up the gravel driveway, its gleam an obscene intrusion on the rustic peace. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, his smile as polished and artificial as his shoes. "Mr. Donovan?" he asked, his voice smooth. "Alistair Finch. I'm a senior partner with Apex Development." Jack said nothing, just wiped his hands on a rag. Aries a low growl at his side. Finch's eyes swept over the property, dismissing the half-restored barn. "I'll be direct. We're acquiring land in this valley for a new golf resort. Your parcel is the final piece. I'm authorized to make you a very generous offer, well above market value. Enough to start fresh somewhere new." Jack looked from Finch's predatory smile to the barn. His barn. He thought of Elias Vance's journal, of the hidden workshop below. This land wasn't just dirt and trees. It was a story he was now a part of. "It's not for sale," Jack said, his voice flat. Finch's smile didn't falter, but a coldness entered his eyes. "Everything is for sale, Mr. Donovan. For the right price." Finch's pleasant facade crumbled quickly. A few days after Jack's refusal, a section of his newly repaired fence was torn down overnight, the tracks of a heavy vehicle gouged into the earth. It was a message. A week later, a formal letter arrived from a law firm, questioning the legality of his deed, citing obscure zoning regulations. Jack knew intimidation tactics when he saw them. He'd employed them himself in faraway lands for reasons he no longer understood. But this was different. This was his home. Finch himself returned a week after that, dispensing with all pretense of a negotiation. He found Jack reinforcing the barn's main doors. "You're a stubborn man, Mr. Donovan," Finch said, standing just inside the cavernous space. "You're wasting your time on this relic. Some things are better left buried." The words hung in the air, a clear and pointed threat. It wasn't about land value anymore. Finch knew something about this place, something connected to Elias. Jack's instincts, honed by years in environments where a wrong move meant death, screamed at him. He saw the way Finch's gaze flickered towards the stone fireplace, a momentary, greedy glint. "Get off my property," Jack said, his voice low and steady, holding a heavy wrench in his hand. Finch gave a short, humorless laugh. "You think you can stop progress? You're one man in a rotting barn. This is my valley. And I always get what I want." As Finch drove away, Jack's mind was racing. The fight was no longer about preserving a dead man's legacy. It was about survival. Finch wasn't a developer. He was an enemy combatant. And this barn was about to become a battlefield. That night, driven by a gnawing suspicion, Jack returned to the hidden workshop. He had spent hours there already, studying Elias's work, but now he searched with a new urgency. Elias's journal had mentioned his treacherous partner, but never by name, only by the initial F. In a dusty corner, beneath a pile of old canvases, Jack found another, smaller lockbox. This one wasn't for a key. It was a puzzle box, requiring a sequence of precise movements to open. He recognized the design principle. It was a field security measure. It took him nearly an hour, his fingers tracing the patterns, his mind working through the permutations. It finally clicked open. Inside were not schematics, but a thin folder of correspondence. Letters between Elias Vance and his partner. And the signature at the bottom of each one was unmistakable. A young, ambitious Alastair Finch. But that wasn't the discovery that made the air leave Jack's lungs. Tucked at the very back of the folder was a single, folded newspaper clipping. It was a small article from a year ago, a brief report on a fatal car accident on a rain-slicked road. The victim was an investigative journalist who had been working on a story about corporate land fraud in the valley. The journalist was Sarah. His Sarah. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over him. It wasn't an accident. Finch wasn't just a greedy developer. He was the man who had taken everything from him. Sarah must have gotten too close to the truth about this land, about what Finch had stolen from Elias Vance 50 years ago. The secret of the barn wasn't just about an old invention. It was about murder. His wife's murder. The grief and rage fused inside him into a single diamond-hard point of purpose. This was not about redemption anymore. This was about retribution. The man who worked on the barn the next day was not the grieving widower. He was Sergeant First Class Jack Donovan. The project was no longer a restoration. It was a tactical preparation. His mission: to protect Elias's legacy and get justice for Sarah. He saw the barn through a different lens now. The high rafters were perfect anchor points for counterweighted traps. The newly fortified doors could be barred and braced. The narrow passages of the hidden workshop offered choke points and defensive positions. He spent 2 days working with feverish intensity, his movements economical and precise. He rigged a pulley system to a heavy cargo net filled with salvaged engine parts, positioning it directly above the main entrance. He set up a series of simple but effective tripwires connected to old sleigh bells, creating a primitive early warning system. He arranged his tools not for construction but for defense. He wasn't building a home. He was fortifying a stronghold. He knew Finch would be back, and he wouldn't be coming with lawyers. He would come with force to take what he believed was his. Jack felt no fear, only a cold, clear focus. The skills that had once haunted him, the muscle memory of combat and strategy that he had tried to drown in whiskey, were now his greatest assets. He was turning this place of healing into a weapon, and in doing so, he felt more himself than he had in a year. As dusk fell on the second day, he sat on the porch, cleaning an old hunting rifle, Aries resting his head on Jack's lap. The dog seemed to sense the shift, his posture alert, his ears swiveling to catch every sound from the encroaching darkness. They were ready. They were a fire team of 2 waiting for the enemy. The assault came just after midnight. The crunch of tires on gravel, the low murmur of voices. The sleigh bells at the far fence line chimed softly, the first note in a deadly symphony. Jack was already in position in the hayloft, peering through a gap in the floorboards. Two large men, dressed in black, moved with practiced ease towards the barn, Finch directing them from the rear. They were professionals. They used a hydraulic tool to snap the new lock on the main doors and entered cautiously. Jack watched them, his heart a steady, cold drum. The first man stepped past the threshold. Jack pulled a single rope. The cargo net dropped with a deafening crash of metal on metal, pinning the man to the floor. The second man spun around, startled, and Jack was already moving. He swung down from the loft on a pre-rigged rope, kicking the second man squarely in the chest, sending him staggering back into a stack of empty barrels. Before the man could recover, Ares exploded from the shadows. A blur of black and tan fur. He hit the man low, driving him to the ground, a deep, menacing growl holding him there. Finch, seeing his plan disintegrate, pulled a pistol and fired wildly into the darkness of the loft. Jack was no longer there. He had dropped into the main workshop using the chaos as cover. "It's over, Finch," Jack yelled, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I know what you did. I know about Elias. And I know about Sarah." Finch's face, illuminated by the beam of his flashlight, was a mask of fury. "She was a nosy reporter, just like you're a stubborn fool. That invention should have been mine 50 years ago." He advanced toward the stone fireplace, his eyes fixed on the hearth. As he reached it, Jack triggered his final trap. He kicked a lever near the wall, and the heavy, iron fire screen, rigged to a separate pulley, swung down like a pendulum, striking Finch's arm. The gun clattered across the stone floor. Finch lunged for it, but Jack was faster. He tackled Finch, and the two men crashed to the ground. Finch was strong, fueled by desperation, and he managed to get the upper hand, his fingers closing around Jack's throat. Jack's vision began to tunnel, black spots dancing in his eyes. Suddenly, a ferocious snarl cut through the air. Ares, having left the second man incapacitated, launched himself at Finch, his teeth sinking into the arm that held the gun. Finch screamed in agony, his grip on Jack's throat loosening. That was all the opening Jack needed. He drove his fist into Finch's jaw, and the man went limp. In the aftermath, the flashing lights of police cars painted the restored barn in strobing blues and reds. Finch and his men were taken into custody, their presence and the evidence in the workshop, the letters, the schematics, Sarah's article, telling a story the authorities couldn't ignore. The full truth of Alistair Finch's 50-year-long crime, from the betrayal of Elias Vance to the murder of Sarah Donovan, came to light. The core of Elias's invention, a small, stable device capable of storing immense amounts of energy, was recovered from its final hiding place deep within the workshop. It was a discovery that would, as Elias had hoped, change the world. Jack, however, wanted no part of the fortune or the fame it brought. With the patent secured, he established the Sarah Donovan Foundation for Investigative Journalism, endowing it with every penny. His wife's legacy would not be a cold case file, but a living force for truth, empowering others to ask the hard questions she had died for. The barn stood complete, a warm, solid structure against the sky. It was no longer a tomb or a fortress, but a home. In the evenings, Jack would sit on the porch, a cup of coffee in his hands instead of a glass of whiskey, and watch the sunset. Ares would be at his feet, his loyal guardian, his steadfast friend. The dog had not just found a hidden secret. He had led his master back from the brink, guiding him through the painstaking work of rebuilding a structure and, in doing so, rebuilding a life. The story of Jack and Ares is a testament to the profound truth that our deepest wounds are often the soil from which our greatest strength can grow. It shows that true loyalty, the kind that asks for nothing in return, can be a compass that guides us out of the darkest wilderness of grief. Their journey reminds us that sometimes, the most important restoration project we can undertake is the one within our own hearts, and that a life of purpose can be built from the very ashes of our past. We want to thank you for joining us for this story. If it moved you, please consider liking this video and sharing it with someone who might appreciate it. Your stories and comments are the reason we do this, so please tell us what the story meant to you. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. We are deeply grateful for your support.